Welcome to another edition of Dream Up, coming to you from KABF 88.3 FM in Little Rock. It's nationally syndicated and internationally streamed. It's the show where everyone has a story of achieving their dream, from celebrities to experts to average Joes and Janes. Today, our very special guest is nationally headlining comic Bob Smiley.
Bob Smiley, I love him. I've done a lot of shows with him. I'm currently in a writer's group with him. Honestly, such a talent, such a great guy. I'm so excited to have him on the show.
Yeah,
it's gonna be fun.
He's coming through Arkansas for a very special show, and we'll have him tell all about it. And I'm one of your co-hosts, Carl Double Portion Kozlowski, because I'm supersized and I want a double portion of blessings from the Lord. And with me, as always, are my co-hosts from Las Vegas,
Antonio Fun Size Delgado.
Fun size. Carl.
Let's hope the ladies don't call you fun size.
And from
Hollywood.
Well, I'm Scrawny Ronnie Pearson.
Is that what your wife calls you? Okay.
Ouch. At least I got a wife.
Well, okay. So guys, how's everything going this week?
Oh, it's going great. Oh man, I'm glad.
By the way, Carl, I shook hands with your wife once too.
I hope she bathed beforehand.
I hope she bathed. Yeah.
Hey, well, obviously, we're having fun to start the show out. I'm so excited. I usually go by Ron, the Mirthful Married Man Pearson, but I'm a comic and I've dreamed up. I love this show because really it's all the ways we can dream up our lives and go from one station where we think we're stuck and improve it in whatever way, whether that's financial, with friends, with the business, with helping others. And we try and showcase that and highlight that across the board. And we've all done it in our own way, right? I've gone from street performer to pretty high-end performer and turned that into a real estate mini empire. Antonio, you've gone from immigrant to immigration lawyer with offices in 7 cities. Normally, your nickname is "I Can Get You In" Delgado, right?
That one too.
Yes. And Carl, you've overcome so many hurdles and obstacles that are mostly physical with things that we know, but like my son has that. We all have things. I'm deaf. That's why I have the headphones on. I'm actually 90% deaf in one ear, 30 in the other. And that's why I'm so loud all the time, but I can't help it. But it helps my comedy persona, right? But you've overcome many things and become a great writer. You're one of the best. You're the best writer that's ever done a story on me, and that's over hundreds of writers. You're a great film critic, and you're kicking butt at Walmart.
Well, somebody has to. But
hey, today's quote. Should we do today's quote?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, go for it.
Today's quote's on something that I love, which is perseverance, because I just think that's kind of the key to everything. The book of Proverbs in the Bible talks an awful lot about perseverance. But a man is not finished when he's defeated. He's finished when he quits. I love that. Who do you guys think wrote that? A man is not finished when he's defeated. He's finished when he quits. Who wrote that?
Mussolini?
Ooh, no, he's finished when he's killed. Hung upside down with his mistress in the town.
He's like, now I'm finished. I'm done.
I will take a wild guess and say, because he's quoted so much by people in LA, and say John Wooden.
Ooh, that's a good one, but it's not John Wooden.
Oh.
It's not John Wooden. It's got a little more irony to it.
Huh.
Who quit?
A little more irony, you said? A little bit more irony?
A lot of irony. Yeah.
Iron Man?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Marvel quote.
That'd be a superhero irony man.
Yeah. Was Richard Nixon.
Okay.
Wow.
Interesting, right? A man's not finished when he's defeated. He's finished when he quits. And
well, he quit.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing out the irony that was sitting right there, Carl.
Wow. Okay. 2,
And he's
3,
like, and now
4.
I'm finished.
Keep up.
No, but honestly, what a great quote, and something we can all use. I love it. How are you
Did he
guys
say
doing?
that before or after he resigned?
I have no idea. I wasn't following him
Oh.
around with a steno pad. I was
Yeah.
going to say a cell phone, but we didn't have them back then, right?
Well, he used to live in I lived in a classic building in LA called the Gaylord Apartments.
Yeah.
And he lived down the hall in the building's one of the few 2-bedroom building apartments in the building. He had his pied-a-terre for Los Angeles there after he resigned, and he really was living like an hour away in Simi Valley. But whenever he was in LA throughout the rest of the 70s, he lived at the Gaylord, which is pretty crazy.
Oh, that's interesting. I think he spent a lot of time in San Clemente as well. So
Yeah, probably, yeah.
yeah.
And
yeah.
and they say the Gaylord is haunted. So I guess that explains why I would hear once in a while, "I'm not a crook," in the hallway.
Well, what's interesting about him is he never took a dime for speeches after he was
Really?
done. He didn't feel like you should capitalize on the presidency like that. So
Good for him.
yeah, he went a different route than a lot of the presidents do. And,
Yeah. Well, did you know that most
pretty
presidents,
interesting.
the average for a president, at least up until Clinton, I'm not sure if it's gone back down, was to make 60,000 a speech. But Bill Clinton changed the game and was demanding 600,000 a speech after his presidency, and he was getting it. It's crazy.
Okay, so I performed after George Bush Sr. 2 months out of office.
Oh, wow.
And I'm pretty sure he got 100,000 for that speech.
Okay.
Because my joke when I went on stage, because I'm following the president, was, and at the time, I'm in my 20s, right? And I'm like, oh man, I can just guess what happened. Well, we need somebody to entertain after the president's off. How much have we spent on the president? Oh, that's a lot. Who's cheap? Let's get Pearson. so I did follow.
You can say you had the president open for you.
Yes, exactly. And I got a standing ovation too, which is good. So
wow.
Or they were leaving. I'm not sure. One or the other. No, I did. I got a standing ovation. It was amazing show down in Puerto Rico. Had a blast. And,
Puerto Rico, wow, that's weird. Huh.
Showbiz is amazing. I was headlining the Improv in Seattle the night before, and I got the phone call at the Improv. Said, "Can you get on a plane tonight right after the show? There's one leaving. It'll get you to Miami to Puerto Rico. We got a car that'll drive you an hour and a half out to the resort, and then you'll be on stage." And I said, "Okay." And they made me the offer, and then the president. I got to this venue. I go, "Who was the last speaker?" And they go, "It's the president." I go, "Bush?" And they go, "Yeah." I go, "Oh, geez." But senior, Bush Senior. So this is 1992. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bush Jr. was still hanging out at the bar at that point,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So that's who I was playing craps with that night.
Yeah.
Actually,
Can you imagine being able to turn around your life in 40 and still become president of the United States? That's crazy.
Amazing.
Isn't that beautiful? Hey, look at Harry Truman. Harry Truman never owned his own home until after he got out of the presidency.
Okay.
Wow.
He was living in his mother-in-law's house with his wife when he got tapped by one of the big crooks of, the political machine crook of Missouri to be a congressman. But I believe Harry Truman was a pretty honorable guy, and I think they were picking him to help the crook look better. And then he did so much good work in the fighting corruption in the House his first 2 years in office. When Roosevelt ran for president again, he got rid of his other ticket. It was Roosevelt's fourth term. He said, "This guy's got a reputation for being honorable," and so he went on and became vice president. And then the president died, and next thing you know, he's president. It's quite an astounding story. I love Harry Truman. He's an amazing guy. Yeah. So.
Well, you know what I also love is I love dealing with the news each week, and we see what I did there. Yeah. Yes. So every week we take a look at 2 or 3 stories in the news that show people achieving their dreams or failing to achieve their dreams. So let's start with, and now the news. Our first story today is about a California man named Dylan who spent $150 a year on his meals since 2014 so that he could pay off his student loan debt, get married, and purchase a house in Los Angeles, which is all three are a miracle in LA these days. So that's right, $150 a year, not per week. How did he do it? He found out that Six Flags Magic Mountain theme park had an annual pass that allowed daily entry into the park and 2 full meals a day, plus drinks for just $150 per year. He would schedule his days from his nearby internship and come in for lunch, then double back for dinner on his way home. He said the first couple of years had just disgusting, unhealthy theme park food, but then the health revolution brought real food to the park. So he really pulled off a deal. Although the article in the New York Post doesn't give his name or his photo, so who knows just how obese he might have actually become. What say you guys?
You know what? Only a young person could have pulled that off, man, because a week of me doing that, my heart would explode, man.
Yeah. He paid off his debts, but he's got blockage in 6 arteries and a tumor under his left arm the size of Tennessee.
But that's pretty smart, you know?
In 2 years, let's see, he's been there a lot. In 2 years, he'll actually be able to get property because he'll be able to claim squatters' rights on the log ride.
I just want to know what kind of loser has a 7-year internship? I mean, come on, really?
You call him loser, I call him a winner. I love this guy because I believe conquering debt, you have to be radical. And debt is one of the biggest stoppers to your dream. Debt will stop your dream in a second. 80% of the country is in debt. What percentage of the country is financially illiterate? Guess?
Probably 80.
80. I wonder if there's a correlation, boys.
Yeah.
The average size of the debt in this country is how much? Do you guys know? 38.
I think it's like 20-something thousand, right?
38,000 by the figures I got. So somewhere in that range. What's the average credit card rate? 17%. So if you were paying $1,500 a month, it would take you 17 years to pay that sucker off.
Wait, what? If you paid how much a month?
$1,500.
To pay off how much debt? 38,000.
38,000 at 17%.
Oh, wow.
When you're at 17%.
Oh my God. Wow.
You know what? I'm impressed by any young person who can plan for the future like that, because when you're young, all you think about is now. You don't think long term. When I was in law school, there was this kid who used his student loans to buy an RV. I'm sorry, to buy a mobile home property, like a mobile home. But he lived off of bare minimum. I mean, he was basically on the verge of starvation. But instead of using that money for anything else, he used it to buy a property, and now he's doing great. He has multiple properties. So I'm impressed by these guys who can sacrifice for the future. It's impressive.
Right. Just in our country, not only are you paying off debt, right? If you go into debt, so it stops your dream, but we're also paying the government, right? The average worker works how many days of the year before he starts paying himself? What the government
more than half.
Well, it's half. 42 days for the average worker. You're working for the government, but then add all the debt you're paying. If you added that on, you're really not working for yourself that much. So it's hard to get ahead. As a country, as a conglomerate, the whole country works until May 8th to pay up. It's all for the government till May 8th.
That's what I meant. Yeah, like half.
Yeah. That's the national debt. And Americans collectively, get this, spend more. This is in 2019 statistics. They spend more on taxes than they do on food, clothing, and housing combined. The government's in my opinion, out of whack. They shouldn't be the biggest thing on the planet. They should be much smaller, and they're taking too much. And so to me, debt kills. So taxes kill dreams, debt kills dreams. And this guy took a radical angle to go after it. And I think you need to do a radical angle to go after it. Carl, you've been battling a debt beast, and I think you've been doing great with it.
Yeah.
What's the biggest tip you would give to?
I mean, well, what I'm applying now, because I'm starting to have money fly in because I'm started doing PR, and like I'm doing good at it. Well for the people that are hiring me, and the word's spreading. I'm getting more and more people coming aboard. And what I'm going to do is the snowball trick that, once you pay off one debt, you instead of banking it right away, you either bank part of it or use all of it towards the next debt. And I mapped out, I did some really stupid things. I'll just admit it, because so many listeners probably have made bad decisions as well. I never really paid off my student loan. I'm lucky that I had low interest, and
in a few more years, Carl, you'll be able to use your Social Security to help pay off that loan.
Probably, yeah. No, that's why I'm trying to deal with it right now. And I mapped out that if I can make what I'm making now, I can pay that off in 4 to 5 years. And and because I'm going to snowball, I just paid off like 2 or 3 credit style debts. And then now I have 1 year left on taxes that I owed from the past out of 4. And I'm going to put all that money towards the student loan money plus, extra money. And my plan is to be done in 5 years, but also still be banking money during those 5 years. And then once 5 years is over, I'm going to put all of it into investments and whatever. So,
and if that doesn't work, you're going to change your name, take another alias, and move to El Paso,
Sweden. Yeah. Yeah.
But you know what, guys? Generally, I think it's a good idea to avoid debt, but you also have to remember how the wealthy use debt. So the wealthy don't actually take in the income. They take out a loan on the property that they own, and they live off that loan borrowed, all that money borrowed. So then when it's time to do taxes, they don't pay any taxes on income because they have zero income. You don't pay any taxes on the money you've been living off the loan. So generally it's a good idea, but you can use it in a smart way. But
correct. So now I'm going to refine what you just said further, because what you said is 100% true, Antonio. So refined a little bit further. It's what is the debt used for? Is it used for an appreciating asset, meaning an asset that's going to go up in value, or a depreciating asset, an asset that's going to go down in value? So if you buy a car, that's a depreciating asset. You get a loan on a car, not only is the value of the car going to go to zero eventually, but you're going to pay extra interest over the years. So it's costing you more and more and more. Whereas you buy property, a property can bring you income. It's going to go up in value. And that debt is going to seem very small in a few years based on the money that income can bring you from the property, or the value that it's going up at such a rate. It way surpasses the debt. So the question is, where is the debt going to? Appreciating asset, which is used for leverage, or depreciating asset, which is actually leveraging you down. So debt can leverage you up or down. Yeah.
Right.
Does that make sense? Carl, could you follow what I just said?
If I could, I wouldn't be in the mess I'm in. Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither was my debt.
That's funny.
I'm sorry, folks. I'm trying to get my Q thing to work. So
you know what? You guys think, last thing before we move on, do you think it would have been smarter, Carl, to use that money you spend on your education and put it on some sort of investment instead of investing in education? I'm thinking all these kids who've invested in all this money in education could have done better if they would have invested it in something else.
I mean, I think that depending on your field, I mean, what did I do? I studied English, my native language. What the hell,
You can quote Shakespeare now.
I look at it, and I mean, I got valuable experience in college on the college newspaper that probably put me ahead for what I did the rest of my life. But at the same time, I still have some things I wrote in college, and I'm like, I can see my voice, my so-called writer's voice already there. I don't, I think I think I could have been just as fine, just doing my own instincts of how to write. But, whether employers see it that way, that's another story. So many places demand that you have a degree, but nowadays they're saying that as the job market is so tight right now, people, standing up for higher wages and, or just being lazy or whatever, they're saying that a lot of employers are starting to say, look, please just show up. We don't care if you have a degree. We'll teach you what to do,
My son's friend, I mean, look, he just graduated from high school, but he walked into a restaurant nearby. He said, "Can I have an application?" They go, "You're hired."
Wow.
And he's already a manager.
What? For real?
Yes, yes. It's
God.
There so many businesses, especially in Los Angeles, at least, where I live, and Antonio, where you used to live, and Carl, where you used to live, are just struggling because of all the mandates that are coming down. And so a lot of people are getting money and not working, and so many small businesses are hurting. So it's interesting that, where money goes, it's an influencer. And so if you pay people not to work, it's going to be hard for the businesses to succeed. But
Well, I mean,
I
and
believe
one thing I wanted to say about,
businesses is what build
oh,
things.
sorry.
Go ahead.
One thing I wanted to say about how you can learn a job on the job, is that I believe my manager at Walmart, when you're managing a store, when you're in charge of a physical location, you're making like six figures for sure. And I think they're making like around 200 is what I've heard. And, and as far as I know about him, and I know for certain
To manage a Walmart?
Yeah, to manage it, because it's a big operation. We're talking.
Oh, I'm in. I'm starting at the bottom. I'm going to get that job.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like, you're dealing with like 80 employees at a store that's just a grocery store, much less super center, and I'm in a grocery store version. And all I'm saying is that my guy, he was in the military, but I think I heard he wasn't even, he just went, from high school to the military, kicked ass at that, and then worked his way up at Walmart over 17 years to being the guy in charge. And I see it all the time, people getting promoted. I got promoted after 6 months to full time, and now I'm training people what to do and all that. So I mean, you definitely can learn a lot of jobs in this world on the spot, and just by doing, and people being willing to show you.
Carl, your new nickname is the Sponge. I'm Carl the Sponge Kozlowski. You soak up information, knowledge, and food at the same time.
I thought you were referring to how much I drain people's resources. But
well, that too.
But anyways, we got to jump to one other quick thing. I'm gonna make an executive decision and skip one story and go to one with Antonio's legal expertise.
Actually,
lead story two,
our guest, and Carl, our guest needs to get on the air right away.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just do it then. All right. One moment, folks. Here comes our guest. And so, Ron, tell us about our guest.
Well, I'm just so excited. First of all, as a comic, you admire other comics. This is a guy I totally admire. I've known him actually for years, but I've only really got to really know him more recently because we're in a comedians writers group together. He's toured nationally for years. Honestly, he makes me laugh hard. And he's actually coming November 10th to Conway, Arkansas, University of Central Arkansas at 7 p.m. You guys got to get tickets. You got to go see him. I love him. Ladies and gentlemen, great, awesome comedian, BOB SMILEY, everybody. BOB SMILEY. Woo!
Thank you. Thank you.
Bob.
Thanks for joining. And I say comedian, but you and I target different areas. Like I do a lot of clean comedy and Christian comedy and regular, meaning secular, in all the clubs. You do a lot of Christian comedy. You do clean comedy. You also do regular. What's heading down the pike for you, and how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. It's good to be back on stage. I'm sure all took a time off and everything. And so I was worried about being rusty. I honestly thought I'd get on stage like for the first time in, 8 months and be like, to get to the other side is how chickens cross the road. Like I thought I would not remember how to tell a joke. It was so like the first couple of times was like rusty, but it was so great to hear laughs again. I'm currently in Alaska this weekend. Wow. And it's 18 degrees here, guys. It's 18. It is the only time, because I'm not a big masker, but in Alaska, I'm a double masker. Like, because it is so stinking cold. And
people see you with the mask and they're like, that Democrat.
Okay, so you talked about what kind of shows I do. I was actually doing a club last night, and I didn't know where everybody was political, but
is that in Anchorage?
It was in Anchorage. Yeah, it was at a place called Main Event, and I did 2 shows, 2 nights here. And
how'd it go?
It was great. They sold out. People are eager for comedy right now. So
I love it.
Yeah, you don't even have to be good. Like it's Ron, you're gonna be
great though, brother. You're great. You're great. No, seriously.
But there you go, Ron Carl. You can get on stage now.
Yeah,
guys.
I like that I was going for the dig on Ron, and he was trying to compliment me. Like that's
I know, right?
That's a good show host, man. That's really good. But I even said that because again, I don't really think to my show. I just get up and I'd said that I get why you guys wear masks, and I was like, normally, I'm a Republican. Here, I'm a Democrat. And as soon as I said it, it was like a cartoon bubble, and I was like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have, because I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. And man, they like thunderous applause. Like it was. I was like, wow. Okay, I'm gonna be okay.
It's just so funny with your name, because Smiley is like the perfect name for a comedian. And you got preachers that do it. You have Marcus Lamb, right? Creflo Dollar. That's kind of ironic.
Yeah. That's a good preacher name. Yeah.
Right.
Dollar.
Chuck Swindoll, but we really know it's spelled Swindle, right?
Yeah.
My real name's Myers, but I had to change my name for Sagan after, and I picked Pearson. And now I'm thinking, God, I should have gone something like, Ron Gigglesworth or something. But Smiley, that's your real name, right?
Yeah, that's my real name. And that's like normally the number one question I get is people like, is Smiley your real last name? And I'll tell you, it is a great last name for a comedian. It is the worst last name if you have to fly, because you show your ID, everybody becomes a comedian when they see my last name. Every TSA person looks at my ID and is like, oh, Smiley, how come you're not smiling? You got a last name Smiley. You ought to smile all the time. We're going to call you Mr. Founding, Mr. Smiley, and they always want to see my smile. So literally every time I get to the airport, I've got to just show my ID and then just smile, because I know I'm going to spend, so one time I didn't. One time the guy just kept asking me, and it was like 4 a.m. at Michigan airport at Detroit. And so I'd done a show that night, and it was Detroit. So, they wanted to take me out and show me how to draw a chalk outline of a body, like do Detroit thing. And I snapped because I was so overtired, and he was like, why aren't you smiling? Your last name's Smiley. And I just was like, you know what? It's 4 a.m. And ever since 9/11, I got to be at the airport 2 hours early in order, to get groped before enjoying, my freedom that I'm supposed to have. I was standing behind a guy who had a belt buckle big enough to serve tea on, and he couldn't figure out what was setting off the metal detectors. And I was like, and I actually ended up making a pretty good joke though. I was like, and another reason why I'm not smiling, you're looking at my ticket and you see it says American Airlines. So we both know I'm not going to fly today. Yeah, I'm going to get delayed. I'm going to get canceled. I'm going to get rebooked. I get to try it all over again. But if it makes you feel any better. So I just smiled really big, and yeah. I learned that was the day that I learned, just smile. Don't try to be funny. Because I told him all that. I was really frustrated. And afterwards, all I remember was like, wow, his hands are cold. So, I learned
Did
pretty
he,
quick.
did he take you out to dinner first?
No, it was Michigan. They're not as friendly up there.
You at least with that name, you can have fun with your kids. You can name your one kid Toothless. Hey, it's Toothless Smiley.
Yeah, I actually, before I became a comedian, I was actually going to school to be a teacher. I was going to do elementary education.
Yeah.
I actually picked elementary because I thought, the kids are impressionable. They need positive male role models. Plus, I was looking at the classes and I already knew, most of the alphabet. And so I picked, it was great because.
I'm the only one that caught that. My friends are like, huh?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, this is a true story. One of my roommates was studying to be a doctor, so he was taking zoology and botany, and my other roommate was studying to be missionary, so he was like studying Hebrew and the original Greek, and they were studying for their finals one night, and it was just like massive notes everywhere, and I was making a bulletin board for my final. I was cutting out paper. They were like, "Smiley, man."
What school was that? What school was that?
I went to Abilene Christian.
Abilene, yeah.
Yeah,
Abilene
their
Christian.
motto is you can't put a price on Christian education, but man, they billed me for it.
But they did.
I actually have an Abilene Christian baseball hat from the team. I was doing warm up on a sitcom in Los Angeles, and I had the whole team in my audience, and they donned me the Abilene Christian. So let's go back to your youth. You were born in Texas?
Yeah, real quick story though, because you reminded me. So I went back about 6 years ago to Abilene, and they brought me in to do a show, and I had accidentally not returned a book from the library, and so it was a Bob Dylan biography book, and I just forgot to return it, and so it was still in the deal, and so I negotiated with Abilene Christian. I was like, if you guys will forgive my debt on that, I'll do an extra 10 minutes at the show. And so they did it. So they wiped so I am debt free now. Well, I'm really close to being debt free at Abilene. So.
That's one way to do it. We were just talking about there was this guy in the news this week who managed to pay off his student debt and buy a house in Los Angeles and get married in Los Angeles because he was spending only $150 a year. Thanks to a loophole at Magic Mountain Theme Park, he could eat 2 meals a day all the time, every day of the year at the theme park, included in the price. So, you found your trick for paying off debt. He's got his, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, so before I became a teacher, I graduated. Before I became a teacher, I wanted to see what it was like to actually make money. And I knew that wasn't going to happen as a teacher. And so I did photography for the first year in Dallas, and I shot for all these hotels and restaurants and stuff. And so I literally could go into any, corporate hotel, and I made friends with the maitre d's and all that. So I could always get free food at that, or restaurants. I had credit for, shooting their stuff. And so for a while it was, if I had a date, I would get a private banquet at, Hard Rock Cafe, and I looked like a big star. And really all I did was I took a couple of Polaroids for him, and that was it. So I had actually figured out a good way to live.
Well, hold on.
This is some good life hacks right here.
You got a date?
Well, we make some stuff up, Ron. You don't have to stop saying out some of the things we make out. Let's go with it, man. What happened to you being a good host and like building me up?
So the funny thing about our show, Bob, is the three of us bag on each other constantly. I mean, we literally, Carl his old nickname was Girth. He's a bit large. And Antonio's the size. He makes jockeys look like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I think they're too afraid to pick on me.
I make them look black.
Yeah, Carl popped up. He was the first guy I saw, and I was like, "Oh, this is Zoom." Like he looks like Zoom.
Yeah. Carl, I think we're going to change your name to Longitude and Latitude, because that's how we measure. That's how, hey, I got to walk around Carl. Well, what longitude and latitude are you at right now?
Yeah, it's like that old your mama's joke about, hey, your mama's so big, when she walked around the house, or I forget what it goes, how she goes around the house. Anyway, never mind, I botched it.
When she
But
sits
she's
around
fat.
the house,
We
she
get it.
sits around the house. I think
Oh,
it's-
that's right, there you go, boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carl,
You know, things are bad when I'm a comedian who needs to have a yo mama joke recited for me.
Yeah.
Things are wrong.
Hey, so anyway, so back to your youth. You're born in Texas. You're born in Texas. What did your father do? How did you grow up? What was life like?
I grew up in a town with 281 people. My dad's favorite joke about that was our idea of a large industrial company was basically a 200-pound Avon lady.
And you had
Can't
them
tell
there.
that
that's-
nowadays. But yeah, tell that. But
What
but
part of Texas? Texas is huge.
yeah, it was in North Texas. It was north of Dallas, north of Denton, right by a town called Gainesville. I had 17 in my graduating class, and so it was very, very small. It was great. I got to play all sports, basketball, football. During halftime, I'd have to change out of my shoulder pads to get in the band, which was like it was
Bob, do you
great.
know that I have a house currently in Gunner?
No.
Yes, I have a house in Gunner.
What did you lose a bet or what? What was the other end of the bet? It had to be bad.
So my wife's name is Tanya Turner, and she's from Tyler, Texas, and her brother's Todd Turner. So it's Tanya Todd Turner from Tyler, Texas.
Oh my gosh.
And so my brother-in-law married a girl from Gunner, and he ended up moving up there. And my in-laws ended up moving up there, and because my father-in-law was a builder, and he built all over the state of Texas and in Arkansas as well. He did stuff in Little Rock, Texarkana. So the first time I met them was in Texarkana, and I also visited them in Little Rock. And I say that, Bob, because our show is based out of Little Rock, and it goes all across, stretches down into Texas, into Oklahoma, Tennessee, Louisiana. Welcome all you people that are listening. But
my first joke, because I don't know if you guys know how I ended up in comedy, but I wasn't pursuing it, and I just ended up on this tour. And I did a stand-up competition my junior year in college, and I just did it for the money. I wasn't trying to do comedy or anything. And
how much money was it, Bob?
$500.
Ooh,
Wow.
that's good.
Oh, that's pretty good.
In
And
Abilene,
what year was that, Bob? 18?
it was 18. Yeah, you got an extra bit for your horse. Yeah, if you won, you got that. No. But $500 in Abilene, that's like 6 months rent.
Yeah.
So it was like a lot.
Yeah.
And so this guy saw me, and then he went out to Nashville to start road managing people. And he was road managing a guy named Clay Cross, and Clay wanted a comedian to come out and kind of MC. And this guy just remembered me. So he called me out of the blue, and I ended up flying to Nashville, getting off a plane and getting on a tour bus and going out as a comedian. Ron, like everybody.
It's impossible. That doesn't happen, Bob.
It was great. That's why I have no advice. Even last night, this kid Sterling came up to the show, after the show, and he was like, "Hey, I want to be a comedian. What do I do?" And I'm like, "Do a stand-up competition your junior year in college and wait for somebody to call you." I had no good advice.
What's crazy? So let me just explain how hard comedy is to people. It normally takes a person 6 years to get good if you're doing it consistently, really consistently, and working your tail off. And that's so much work to even get the stage time. The hours you have to put in to get on stage are 10 times the amount of time you're going to spend, 20 times the amount of time you're going to spend on stage. You're just constantly working, and the writing is impossible. So it takes 6 years to get good. Carl, how many years you been going at it? You're not even good yet, Carl.
Yeah, thanks. Never mind. Wow.
No,
Thanks.
Carl can rip it. Carl can rip it. But it takes 10 years to get great, 15 years to get really, really great. And I'm only literally less than 4 or 5 people I've heard that were successful that early. It's astounding. George Wallace, one of our former guests, he was the best man at my wedding, but his second year of comedy was on the Tonight Show. And
Yeah, that kind of stuff
doesn't
is
happen.
I do think that going out on tour as a comedian, but not really being a comedian, that was kind of my open, because most people start with open mic nights, and I had not done any of them. I'd done stand up twice in my entire life. I did that stand up competition, and then I did one for my fraternity, and I did only that one because then I didn't have to pay for the banquet. Like they let me in my and my date. Yeah, just go with it.
No, but what did you use for material? Like Carl has really good material. I have really good material. Carl's material is about himself. My material is about myself. But when you're just starting, what are you talking about?
I talked about the Abilene Zoo. The zoo was like really rinky dink. I talked about how they, basically tied deer horns onto dogs, and like it was not like real. I talked about that. I talked about student loans, and I'm trying to remember what else, man. I didn't have a lot of stuff, but I had a lot of local stuff. Like because I went to school there, I had stuff about that was funny specifically to people that lived in Abilene, and so that's how I squeaked by. But I went out. Oh, that's what I started to say. So I'm flying to Nashville, about to go out on tour as a comedian, and I've got, nothing. And so Texarkana, I wrote this joke. It is terrible. And I was told immediately I couldn't use it, but I was like, Texarkana is half Texas and half Arkansas. So basically guys want to date their sisters, but they know it's wrong. And that was my first joke that I ever wrote.
Oh,
and I got there. And the manager looked at my stuff and he was like, yeah, no, you can't do that. So that was the other hard thing, finding out where like something's funny and finding out where something's clean and Christian, to find where those two things overlap, where it's funny, but it's clean and it's Christian.
It's hard.
It was super hard. And I wasn't even pursuing comedy. So now I'm on stage, and Clay had these moving lights that kept breaking. And so when they would break, I would have to go out there and ad lib. And so that's where I learned crowd work. That's where I learned not to say whatever pops in my head. I was in a place by Lake Winona, and the Judds were like huge and popular at the time. But Winona, this is horrible because I was just scrambling for any joke that popped in my head. And Winona had gained a lot of weight, and she was she was a spokesman of Weight Watchers. And because I was just flop sweating, dying on stage, I was like, so why do they call it Lake Winona? Is it a really big lake? And it was just dead quiet. And I was like, oh, anyway, let me tell you about our merchandise. Like I didn't know what to do. It was so bad.
So was your father funny growing up?
My dad is still one of the funniest guys ever. It was a small school, and he was a superintendent. And my ears are always like, I have really big ears. And so my dad would do things like come over the intercom and be like, can everybody's attention, please? Bob Smiley, you left your earmuffs in the parking lot. And we can't get the buses out. Can you go move, and stuff like that. Like it was, he was always really funny. Actually, here's a cool thing. My dad would come eat lunch with me. And because we were funny and we didn't plan anything out or anything, we would just recap the day or talk about, interesting things that everybody wanted to sit at our table just to listen to me and my dad be funny. And that was like one of the first times that I was like, oh, comedy is powerful. Like I was the cool kid because I can make people laugh. And then when my dad was there, my dad was super funny. And so we would just sit there and riff, and man, that drew everybody in.
So you think you got your sense of humor from him?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So my father was really funny as well, but he died when I was 7. So I never really got it. Mm-hmm. I just have kind of always been that. And my brothers and sisters, I'm the baby of 8, and they'll always go, oh, you're the most like dad. You're the most like dad. Carl, did you get your humor from your dad, or what?
No, I don't know. My folks are not really funny people. I think what it was it's like a reaction, from being so bottled up at home. I mean, like I love them and everything, but we were very, it was a very serious atmosphere at home a lot of times. And I think that whenever I could get out in high school and especially in colleges where I really got into it. I did a contest like Bob did. That was the first time I ever did stand-up, was for a contest at TCU. And I won second place my freshman year and then won it the next year. And I think it was just the feeling like, oh my God, I'm finally out of the house. I can say whatever I want. And it just exploded out of me, you know?
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And Antonio has a tremendous work ethic and self.
I do.
Yeah, but your father was a really hard worker too, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, we pick it up from our fathers, and who knows, maybe it's genetic at the same time, right? A little bit of nurture and nature at the same time. I think we get it from them that way.
Yeah,
I agree with that. It was funny because then when I moved away to college, my dad called me, and I have a younger brother, Brian, and my dad called me and he was like, "Did you know Brian was funny?" And I was like, "No, he's funny." And we realized it's because he never got a chance to talk at home because it was me and my dad like talking all the time. And then whenever I was gone, then we realized, oh, he's pretty funny also. And so I think a lot of it is just what you said. It's nurture, and you know, a lot of it is just like, I think people are born, you know, either funny or not. You can learn some things, but you know, I think you know, God kind of designs you to be funny or not, and so you go with it.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're talking about fathers, but how about our mothers? Maybe the mother's the funny one. And like, you know, my wife was always known as the funny person in her group. They all say, "Oh, you're so funny." And when I met her for the first few years, I was a comic at the time, and I'm like, I don't think my wife's very funny at all. Now I go, she's pretty funny. I don't know why I couldn't see it, but she just has a different sense of humor, you know. So I finally got into it. You know what's funny? I just think in comedy or in art, people see something, they go, it's not for me or whatever. But once you hear the voice and are understanding the voice, then it can breathe through. So your voice came early. Carl's voice, we talked earlier in the show about his writing voice at TCU came early, that he could see how he was as a writer. What about your comedic voice? When did that show up, and when did you know? Just as doing writing groups with you in the last couple of months, I'm seeing your skills, and they're mad skills. But you're definitely one who knows your voice very specifically, and it's interesting. How long did it take that when you write a bit, you go, oh, mine will go down exactly this track?
It took about 3 years. You know, you're talking about dads. My dad would let me stay up and watch Johnny Carson's monologue growing up, and then I had to go to bed unless there was a comedian on. And if there's a comedian on, because we love comedy, he would let me stay up and watch the comedian too. So even though I never wanted to be a comedian, I studied comedy all the time because I knew I was going to use comedy in whatever I did. I thought teaching was going to be it, and I could use humor, you know, to draw kids in and stuff. And so I studied it early on. And, you know, when Carson would bomb a joke and he would say, "I broke the rule of 3," or, you know, like something like it, I would go and try to figure out what the rule of 3 is. And I would, you know, so I studied it. So when I went out to Nashville and, you know, went out on tour, I knew finding my voice was important. It still took me about 3 years. I remember I was in Lafayette, Louisiana. And that was the moment where I realized I was in control of the show. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, I know my voice. I know. And what happened was something happened over to the side. Somebody said something. I abandoned the bit that I was on. I ad-libbed some stuff. And then I thought, oh, I've got this other bit. It's my closer, but it would go really well here. So I moved that around. And as I was doing that closing bit, I'm in my mind rearranging my entire show and moving around. And when I was doing that, all of a sudden I just stopped on stage and I was like, okay, now I'm a comedian. Like now I'm a real comedian because I am in control. I'm going to take these guys wherever I want to take them tonight, and they're going to follow me. And that was a moment, but that was about 3 years in where I was like super comfortable and, you know, felt like I knew what my voice was.
It's still
guys,
so.
what do you?
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
guys, what do you mean by know your voice? What do you guys mean by that? Because I don't get it because I'm not a comedian. What do you guys mean by that? Know your
Well,
voice.
when you're in a court and you're talking to the judge, when you know where you're going to take the judge, because you know your track of what it's going to be. So as a comedian, I can write a joke, the same joke, and it would be different for me to deliver than it would be for Bob or different for Carl,
That makes sense.
because we have a different way of looking at life. And if so, once the audience gets to know how you look at life, the best example for this would be my description of Sam Kinison. Sam Kinison at the Comedy Store used to get on stage late at night, and he would be yelling, and people would head for the doors. He would be known as a room clearer, meaning, oh, Kinison's on, 50% of the audience is going to leave. So the comics after him would be very angry because they go, you just chased out half the room because he had all that screaming. But once he did the bit about his girlfriend splitting up with him, and his heart, it's like he had his heart in a paper bag on the sidewalk and was stamping on it. It gave you the reason for his screaming. So now I know where he's coming from, and he's going to bring up all the things where I want to scream too, because that's happened to me, and he's going to be that guy for me. But if I gave Ron Pearson, Carl Kozlowski, Bob Smiley that same joke, Sam Kinison joke wouldn't work, because we're not coming from that same place. So, So it's is that a good description?
That's a great description. And, we're in a writing group together. And so when you guys send me bits, and I said this on our last meeting, I was like, I've locked into Robert G. Lee's rhythm on stage and his voice. So when I'm reading the stuff he's sending and I'm punching it up in his voice. I know how he's going to deliver it. I know where he's going to pause, and he's going to pause totally different than me. He has a different facial expression for things, and it is completely different. When I first started trying to write, I was on this tour, and Howie Mandel had a talk show at the time, and I would watch that every single day. And I realized I had to stop doing that, because when I would sit down to write, I was writing in Howie Mandel's cadence and rhythm and all that, because I was watching it every single day, and I was a big fan of his anyway. And I realized and that was a big step as becoming a comedian, was I can't write in other people's voice. I have to write and how I'm going to deliver it, how I'm going to say it, why I'm saying it, what's, the background and driving me to want to share this with everybody else. And so that's a big key to being a comedian, is to find your voice. I'm not going to tell a joke the same way Emo Phillips is going to tell a joke.
That's for sure. Honestly, it's the hardest thing to have, and to have an original voice and your own voice. And I self-accuse myself of just being a great performer. I have less of a voice and more, it's after so many years, the voice is more there, but I shift gears to whatever I need to do, because I can play any audience. And literally, if I went down the list of the different types of people I perform for, it's so broad that I can't be the same in everyone, because people won't relate to me. So I shift gears constantly. I have 40, 50 years, which is why I do warm-up comedy really well, because you have people from all over the world. You have hip Hollywood people, and you have people from halfway houses, and you have people that don't speak the language, and you now aren't going to get 10 minutes for them. You have to entertain them for 3.5, 4.5, 5.5 hours. So I can shift a million gears. So my problem always is getting it back into the one voice that is the bulk, or at least where I want to take my voice. So Bob and I are currently working on all my ADHD stuff, and I'm actually thinking I might be able to be a voice for those with ADHD, not just to be, oh, that guy's funny and he has ADHD, but to be more of, wow, he really gets it and he gives me hope. That's actually what I'm trying to do with the piece. Thoughts?
Yeah, because
Well,
So is go ahead,
go
Bob.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to
You go,
say,
Bob.
you know, every comedian really is a preacher, whether you want to be or not. Like, because you're saying something. Chris Rock he preaches on stage when he gets up and he's talking about something he's passionate about. And so if you can lock into that and be like, okay, I've got to have the jokes there, but what am I really trying to say? I think that's going to help streamline your writing. And that bit you're working on, you know, it's funny. It's really funny, but like, I think we unlocked some things of like, oh, we're actually saying some really important things and, you know, hopefully encouraging people and, you know, and getting it out there. And your voice is, you know, going back to that, it's going to change every single show. But if you truly know the nucleus of it, then you can change. I don't think I told you this, Ron, but about 2 weeks ago, there's a guy who books local stuff. And so sometimes I'll go and do something local, especially during quarantine, because, you know, I didn't have any shows. I basically was doing this video game called Uber Eats driving. And yeah, it sounds like a joke, but that's literally how I fed my family for a year. Was Uber Eats driving, and I substitute taught. And so I did a sold out show in Dallas the night before. And then I had this, I agreed to this afternoon show that this local kind of promoter, he just books like, you know, random stuff. So I didn't know a lot about it. I show up, it's a nursing home. It's for Alzheimer's patients. Now, my great grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I lived with them for 4 months to kind of help them. And so I'm kind of passionate about it. So I was like, oh, this, I think it'll be good. And I get there. Well, the person who booked me actually got COVID, and so wasn't even there. And they thought they were having a staff meeting, and they thought the staff meeting was called off. They didn't know I was coming in to do. So they didn't even want to see me. So walked in, they said that they couldn't leave the patients alone. And so it had to be in this big room. I had to wear my mask. There was no mic at all. So I am performing for 11 staff members who are all sitting at individual tables in this room.
Oh
Nightmare.
The patients are all just wandering around like the Walking Dead. Like they're just walking around and picking up a book and looking at, you know, and I'm just up there. And again, like I'm very sensitive about, you know, that infliction. And so I really wanted to do a good job and I wanted to encourage him, but I was like, this is a ridiculous setup.
Yeah.
I'm doing stand-up with a mask on, you know, away from everybody that's spread out. And this is, at one point I noticed they're looking over my shoulder, and I turn and look, and there was a patient who had wandered up and almost had her chin on my shoulder. And it spooked me. And so you're always going to get into these weird shows where you have to change your voice. So I just slowed down and I did a little more interaction and that kind of stuff. And I got my favorite heckle. At the end of the deal, I did 30 minutes. And at the end I go, all right, guys, I'm going to close with this one last story. And this lady in a wheelchair who hadn't like said anything, she just had been rolling around. She looked up and she goes, good, because I'm tired of this. It was my favorite heckle ever, because it was from the heart. It wasn't like, she wasn't trying to be mean. And I said, you know what? We're all tired of this. Like can we just say that this is the weirdest situation ever? Like I just acknowledged it, and it was so great. So you got to find your voice, but every situation is going to be different that you walk into, and you got to be ready to adapt for that.
Yeah, good point. I mean,
you guys have good heckle stories? You guys have good heckle stories? How about you, Ron?
I've got one that I just remembered this week, because I was interviewing a comic in Chicago. I write journalism as well, Bob. And I was interviewing a comic, and he was talking about, you know, did you ever have a night that was so weird that it changed everything about how you did direct? And I remember it was the late 90s, and I was at Zany's in Chicago, which was the biggest club then. And I told a joke. I don't remember what it is. I probably wouldn't share it again now anyway. But you know how time changes, society evolves. And I did some sort of lame, you know, gay joke that would not fly nowadays for sure. And you know, this is like 1997 or 8 or whatever. And so I say one joke. It wasn't vicious, but it still wasn't cool. And there was the audience was totally with me the whole set until I tell that joke. And then all of a sudden, one table, the audience was sort of laughing to my joke, except for one table filled with gay guys. And they all went like, it was like an instant chant. That's so funny. That's so funny. That's so funny. And they wouldn't let me get another joke out the whole remaining 5 minutes of my set. And they kept going, that's so funny. And until I finally just had to like slink off the stage in shame. And I don't think I ever told another joke that had anything to do with being gay ever again, because I was like, I don't ever want to go through that ever again. It was horrible.
That's funny.
Well, thank you for uplifting the show, Carl. That was very uplifting. I feel better about life now. I
don't know. You asked if there was any heckle. There's a heckle.
Welcome to the Dream Down Show.
Hey, well.
And by the way, Ron, you're gonna stop and point out that I could not get a date, but you're not gonna bust Carl on the fact that he said he had audience members at his show. Come on.
Wow.
Well, okay, so I want to get into something. So Bob, so our show is often about, achieving our dreams. You became a comedian, you're using your funny, but in the world of Christian comedy, which I'm involved in as well, being clean is one thing, but you went through a situation in your life with a divorce, and really, what is that going to do to your comedy career? Because if you were in the secular world, no one really bats an eye because, oh yeah, that guy got divorced. Of course he did. That's what people do. But in the Christian market, that's a little bit different. How did you pivot from that? And have you recovered? How are you hurting? How has it helped? What's going on with that?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I was married almost 18 years. And we had 3 kids, and she met this guy at our church that we were hanging out with all the time. He had way bigger bank accounts than I did. And,
thank God you said bank account.
And, they and they're married, and and this is almost 7 years ago. But she just left. She left, and I was, so there was a lot going on at the time. One, I was dealing with, betrayal and all this stuff, and divorce, and it came out of the blue. Like I didn't see.
How much were you on the road at the time?
Not a lot. I was, I always limited my shows, so I was home a lot. So I basically usually would do a Friday, Saturday night show, and then I was home all week.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I wouldn't, I was actually home more than most husbands and fathers because I put a cap on how many shows I would do.
Yeah.
And then during the summer, they could travel with me, and so I do more shows in the summer and stuff like that. But she left, and so I was dealing with all of that, and then I was dealing with being a single dad of 3 boys, like trying to do this, and because all 95% of my shows are in churches, I was like, this may be the end of my career, because churches, Christians are, I do a joke on stage where if somebody laughs at something they're not supposed to laugh, like, like because I say something about me, I always go, don't judge me, act like a Christian, judge me silently in your mind. And they, I really thought that, because Christians don't deal with divorce very well. And I really thought nobody's going to book me at all. Because I'm divorced, even though it wasn't my choice, and I wasn't, but I thought, on top of all this, I'm also dealing with the fact that this career that I'd worked so hard to build might just be over because of it. And I had done a marriage date night ticketed event for Lakewood, this tiny little church in Houston.
Tiny little church, sure, yeah.
And it had done really well the year before. It sold out like super quick. And so they immediately booked me for a second year. And I was like gonna go and do this date night marriage deal. And so that was like my first show back, after all the divorce and everything. So I called them and I was like, hey guys, I got to be honest with you. I got to tell you what I'm going through, because I don't want to hide anything. And I totally understand if you, don't want to do the show or whatever. And I will never forget what they said. They paused on the phone and they were like, do you have Tim Hawkins' phone number? No, that's not true. Totally not true. They actually paused and they were like, well, we don't want to make you uncomfortable, but would you come talk about it? And I was like, you want me to talk about my divorce on stage at a church? And they were like, there's so many marriages that are hurting and struggling. We would love for you to come and talk about it. And so that gave me a little bit of hope of like, oh, maybe this would be. And so because my job is to make people laugh, I had encouraging things to say, but I also had to have jokes. And so I went to the Houston Improv. I had never done an open mic night before.
Oh my gosh.
I thought, I'm going to go and I'm going to try out this bit on divorce to see if it's funny, and then I can add all the encouraging stuff. And I walked in, and I'm not a famous dude, but I walked in and the guy that was running it like knew who I was. And so he immediately put my name on the clipboard. I didn't have to put my name in a bucket.
Yeah.
All these other comics that show up, an hour or 2 hours before to get their name in a bucket and hopefully get drawn, they all were looking at me like I was the biggest jerk to walk in. And they didn't know who I was. I got up, I did this bit about divorce. And it was great because it went really well. And then all those comics wanted to talk to me afterwards because they were all like, that was amazing. Like, that was so good. Like, how long have you been doing comedy? And I told the truth. I was like, that was my first open mic night. And which is true. I've been doing it,
Been making a living at it for decades, but
yeah. But they were, several of them were like, "Oh, dude, you're gonna make it." And so I did that. I did that show for Lakewood, and it went really well. And then I flew to Michigan the next day, and I did a show up there. And again, I wasn't going to talk about it, but I was on stage, and I just really felt the strong desire to kind of open up and talk about it. And I was ad-libbing all these jokes and stuff about it, but also, like you said, knowing my voice. I was a hurting comedian that was there to make people laugh, but I also wanted to give some people some hope. And after I got off the stage, there was this guy who went immediately to my merch table, and he was standing there and he looked angry. And I was like, oh, here comes the fallout of, you shouldn't be talking about divorce and all this stuff. And I walked up and he grabbed my shoulders and he was shaking. And he goes, my wife left me yesterday.
Oh my.
All right.
And he was like in tears. And he was like, and one of the things I talked about is how God built us for community, and he doesn't want us to go through things alone. And so I talked about it, and he goes, I don't know who you are. I didn't want to come to your show, but my friend dragged me here. And one, I did not expect to laugh that much, but two, I did not expect to hear any kind of message of hope. And I needed that. And so when that happened, I was like, oh, so this, I think God can use this. And so I started talking about it on stage, and I was really pleasantly surprised at how churches embraced that and, wanted me to come and talk about this and how you get through the dark times and, all that kind of stuff. And so, I was really nervous that I was going to have to, growing up, my brother and I, we started a lawn mowing company. We called it Smiley Brothers Mowing Company. And our motto was, we give you mower for your money. And I honestly thought that I might have to go back to mowing lawns and all that. But I was pleasantly surprised that I could still go up and have my voice and try to, make people laugh, but also give them some encouragement and stuff. And so it turned out to be okay.
It's really interesting. You're saying that, so you were on tour with Tim Hawkins for years. And so that's a huge arena size or big theater size or, mega church size tour.
The biggest difference between my shows and Hawkins shows, when I'm touring with Hawkins, I don't have to go out and ask everybody to move down front. Such a big difference.
That's funny. Well, I toured with Apostles of Comedy, and when we went out, we were trying to figure out how, what's our voice going to be? What are we going to try and get across? And, we struggled for a couple of months talking about it, but we finally came down with each of the four of us have our own thing we want to say, and we're going to shotgun it because your story about that guy coming and you really giving him hope, you know, well, each one of the different apostles had a different thing to say. So we each got our own moment, and we knew we would touch so many people that way. I just think that's great. I love the way you pivoted and made that happen. We're so thankful to have you on our show. You are awesome. I love working with you in the writing room. I can't wait for the future. You got to go see Bob Smiley, November 10th, Conway, Arkansas, 7 p.m., University of Central Arkansas. Get your tickets. You got to see him. Trust me, you will come home a much happier individual at the end of the night than you were at the beginning, because Smiley, you're aptly named. You give that much joy.
Yes.
Thank you for joining our show. We can't wait to have you back on again, brother.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. All right, well, folks, we're out of time. So till next time, I want to say thanks to KBF 88.3 FM and to Bob Smiley for coming on the show. And we'll
All right,
see you
Bob.
next time. Take care.
Cheers.